Hi everyone, I'm so excited to have Aly here with me today. She is a former singles and pair skater, Ukrainian novice bronze medalist, and two-time regional champion. So struggling with a back injury for several years, burnout, and an eating disorder forced her to end her athletic career, but it also served as her inspiration to explore the field of sports medicine and injury rehabilitation. So she has now obtained a bachelor's degree in kinesiology and is a certified massage therapist and Sanar practitioner. So thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited for this.
Yes, I know. So let's give like a little recap. How did you get into figure skating?
Well, as I feel like as any Russian or Ukrainian skater, I started skating when I was 4, and my mom just brought me to the ice rink. And actually, the reason why she brought me to the ice rink is because she always wanted to be a skater but never had the opportunity to do so. So she was kind of almost fulfilling her dream in me, which later, backfired. But basically, that's how I started. And then it was kind of out there, you start a sport to be good at it, to be professional at it. So I didn't really have a choice to not be, training 24/7. So that was kind of always the mindset that I had when I started skating.
Yeah, that was exactly why my mom put me in figure skating too. I mean, I had a lot of energy, but like her dream was always to be a figure skater and she would love that and ballet too. So I feel like that's why
Yeah.
our moms got along so well.
Yeah, I know, right? They would always talk while we were skating on the ice, and they're
Yeah.
always have something to talk about together. Yeah.
Yeah. So then when did this first back injury occur?
So I am not sure. Well, I started having back pain around maybe age 11. Actually, at that time, I started doing pairs. So I was very small when I was before I hit puberty. So I was very small, and everyone told me I'm perfect for pair skating. So I started doing pair skating. And it was kind of a psychological battle for me because I loved like the feeling of skating with someone, skating fast, someone lifting you up, but at the same time I was scared of heights. So um, I think kind of made myself think that I have a back injury, and I started having this back pain. But that's what I think now. I don't remember exactly, but I just remember complaining to my mom that I have back pain. And sometimes I would use that as an excuse to not do pairs that day. so so then we took an x-ray, I think when I was 11 or 12. I never saw that x-ray until I was about 15 or 16, and when I saw it later, it turns out that my L4 vertebrae, like a little piece of the body of the vertebrae, was chipped off. So I was like, Mom, what is this? And she's like, oh yeah, that happened. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So that's what happened. I kind of started having more and more back pain as I was growing, and we found a manual therapist back in Ukraine who was actually able to help me with my pain. And as I remember, it was just overtraining of muscles, because we're one-sided. I believe my left side was really, really tight all the time. So I even had to get shots. Like I would get manual therapy done twice a week. And it was at least half a year before I was kind of like uh, feeling better again. So then that was we were able to maintain that for a while until we moved to the States. And then in the States, we had a really hard time finding a good professional who would actually help me as much as that guy helped me back in Ukraine. So we kind of gave up on the search. I mean, we've been to chiropractors,
Yeah.
physical therapists, massage therapists, you name it, and it's expensive, so we just kind of gave up because we didn't really have the financial opportunity continuously get treatment for that. So that was kind of what brought the end to my career, because when you wake up in the morning and you can't get off the bed, then you're kind of like, okay, I don't feel so good. This doesn't feel that I don't want to go to practice today. So that kind of eventually made me realize that maybe it's time to stop.
Yeah, but it's just crazy. It shows the intensity of the sport that as an 11-year-old girl, you already had a fracture on your vertebra.
Yeah. I'm assuming that fracture came from maybe a hard fall from a throw,
Yeah.
because we started learning triple throws at that time, and I remember taking a really hard fall, and it was a hard fall. It felt like someone pushed me in the guts, and I was like, okay, maybe that's that was the moment, or something else, who knows, but definitely figure skating is a very intense sport, and I think a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, all those falls, especially when you're even by yourself, but especially in a partner sport where you're having someone else like in pairs chuck you across the ice and you're trying to do a double or a triple, or in ice dance. I mean, I had so many times where I had this one lift where my partner was swinging me around, and one time just tripped and I just flew across half the ice. Like,
Oh my God.
stuff like that happens. And I think
Yeah.
also it just shows that every life of a skater is just constantly fighting that battle of who is the best PT. Like, I'm going to this,
Yeah.
doesn't work. I have to go to another one, doesn't work. And then you're just lost because you
Yeah.
have no one to guide you, no one to tell you what's the right thing to do. And you feel helpless because you're like,
Yeah.
I'm spending so much money. I'm in constant pain.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And then a lot of kids just end up quitting.
Yeah. Yeah. For the sake of their health, for the sake of their parents' money, you gotta leave some for the food, not just skating and doctors and all the extra stuff. Yeah, for
There's
sure.
so much more that goes into it than just paying for the actual ice time and coaches, when it in itself is so incredibly expensive. And
Yeah.
body
Yeah. And
maintenance.
I think it's very, and here it's very disorganized, in Ukraine, in Russia. I know that when you reach a certain level, like a junior or senior level, um, that is also different. The way that we do it here, you take a test, you take a senior, junior or senior test. Out there, it's by your achievement. So if you have been achieving like a certain placement, so say like first through third in several regional competitions, then eventually you get to a certain level, and then you get to a higher level, and then if you go international, there's another level. So I remember I reached I mean, I don't even know how to translate it, but it's like master of sports, like that's a literal translation, right? So once you reach that, your ice time is free, your coaching is free. um, you get your choreographer, you get all the off ice, it's all for free, and people who go higher, they get paid. And then on top of that, there's a doctor that's provided, or someone who's like a team massage therapist or a team physical therapist. So it's a little more, there's a system. Here it's like everything is broken apart, everything is just on its own. I had to search for a ballet person forever, and when I came to them and I was like, hey, can you take a look at my choreo from like off ice? I was trying to do my choreo for my long program, and he looked at it and he was like, yeah, that looks great. And I'm like, you don't have anything to say? I mean, if I did that in front of my old choreographer, she would literally pick me apart. Like she would pick like a little like finger, just
Yeah.
she will find something that I did wrong. I'm sure she would find a million things. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm great, awesome, like let's go. So it's very different out here. It's definitely it was definitely a challenge getting used to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to mention, is that a lot of US skaters, if they haven't traveled internationally or if they don't have any international friends, they don't really know how the system works elsewhere. But I mean, when I was training, we had skaters from basically all over the world. And I mean,
Yeah.
other countries, you actually get paid. Like you
Yeah.
get like monthly salary essentially
Yeah.
to skate. The federation covers your ice time, or at least some of your coaching at some extent, like maybe even some of your living, groceries. I mean, there's so much more support for it because
Yeah.
they really want their athletes to get high up, and then they also help provide them with nutritionists, anything they could need. And here it's kind of like, well, we'll pay you only if you get to like, I mean, I barely got any money, barely any funding. Like it was maybe enough to cover one costume for an entire season.
Crazy.
And like what I was doing the research into, there's only two contracted dietitians for US figure skating for the entire federation. And I'm sure if you would look into any other country, they have so much more support.
Yeah.
And I think we just don't care. Maybe it's not that we don't care enough about our athletes, but we don't think into what really goes into being an elite athlete.
You know, I think it's all about what kind of sport it is also, because
What brings in the
it,
big money.
here, exactly, you know, here certain sports get obviously way more exposure. I mean, there's NBA on TV right now. That's where the public interest is at, you know. So that also makes a big difference, because in countries like Russia, you know, winter sport is very popular. Skating right now is like a soap opera, you know, like everyone is glued to the screens to know whether Medvedeva is, you know, skating in Russia or in Canada, or, you know, who went where. And so that's like sparks public interest a lot. We don't really have that here. You know, it's not really getting that much exposure. You know, even if nationals are on TV, I don't think many people are tuning in. So I feel like that also plays a big part. Here it's everything's commercialized, right? It's so I think they don't really care about the athletes. They care about entertainment, right? That's all there is.
The last nationals, I remember I was already at University of San Francisco, and I was downstairs in the cafeteria, and I look on the TV, and I think it was Nathan Chen skating, and I was like, no way. And I look,
Yeah.
no one is watching the TV. Really
Mm-mm.
not a single person. And like in the semester before soccer was on, literally all the boys, even the girls, are just sitting there like watching, like, oh my God, what's happening? And I
Yeah.
was like, that is crazy. Like we work our entire lives to put so much energy, spend so much money, break our bodies essentially for this sport, and then it really truly doesn't get the attention it deserves. And like I'm
No.
shocked at how much football players, baseball players get paid, like hundreds of
Yeah.
millions. How is that?
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my mind around it. And then figure skaters get barely anything.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, except for presenting
You're doing it to get your Olympic medal whenever you get there, you know, but like less than 0.1% get to Olympics, let alone getting an Olympic medal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly.
But you know what's crazy, with all the funding that all these teams get, you know, NBA, you know, baseball, hockey, um, what's crazy to me, and I speak from experience and from what I've heard, even though they have all this funding, their athlete care is actually pretty outdated. So we worked with a few athletes back at the clinic that I used to work at, and I mean, these athletes came to us broken. I kid you not. They're on a contract. They're earning so much money, and they're so broken that, you know, their doctors, team doctors, or whoever, you know, and that's another thing, team doctor. Like, who is the team doctor? You know, like, what does he know about injuries? Is he injury specific? Is he like, what is he? So and I mean, they came to us with injuries that could have been fixed years ago, and they've been training, they've been competing, they've been doing all these games with those injuries, and nobody even thought to pay attention to those injuries or do like a proper rehab a
Yeah.
proper time off, just it really, like, it amazes me. It amazes me how much, how little attention those injuries get out
Yeah.
there.
I mean, so I think it was 2016 or so, it was 2 weeks before Junior Worlds, and I got really bad out of nowhere tendonitis, like lace bite in my ankle, to the
Mhm.
point that like one day I was fine doing a run through, and then 5 minutes later I couldn't put any weight on my foot. I was like, what is happening?
Mhm.
The entire week I essentially couldn't skate, didn't do any run throughs. We were all like, oh my God, are we gonna have to withdraw from Junior Worlds? Like I essentially cannot skate at all.
Mhm.
And never even once, now that I think of it, did I think to like reach out to Team USA and say, hey, like I'm really hurting. I don't know if I can compete. Can you send a doctor over? Can you like hook me up with someone? I was completely on my own. I was at a loss. I had no idea what to do. I went to
Mhm.
get a cortisone shot from my like practitioner, and he put it in the wrong place. I didn't even know that. Like it didn't do anything.
Oh
And
no.
to compete, I had to pop like 5 Advils, and it didn't even do.
Oh God.
And I remember I was on the like 20-minute warm up before, and our coach was like, I was crying because I was in so much pain. I'm like,
Mhm.
why are you crying? And I was like, I can't do it. He's like, knock it off. Like you're here. I don't care how bad it hurts. Suck it up, and you have to skate. And I mean, I did, and we got fourth at that competition, and it was amazing. But the the amount of pain I
At
was
what
in,
cost?
yeah, and no doctor at the competition even tried to help me. Like there was nothing. I was on my own. I came back. I saw a PT there on my own, who he does work for US figure skating, but
Mhm.
it wasn't US figure skating facilitating it. I was doing all the research on my own. I went to
Mhm.
get a PRP shot. I took months off skating. I contacted Wii Sport and got custom boots made the following year. But
Mhm.
it took months off. I came back on the ice and it was just as painful. And I was
Mhm.
like, what do I do now? And I,
Mhm.
I ended up skating for a whole season with a soccer shin guard right under my tongue to protect. And at competitions, it would like slide up or like you could see it and it was bulky. But that was the only way I could skate without pain. And if it wasn't for that and the custom skates that I had made, my career would have ended because even now, 2 years after retiring, it still hurts. It's tender to put pressure on it. If I walk for a long
Mhm.
time, it aches. But it was just me dealing with this on my own. There's no
Yeah.
help unless you're an elite athlete or the
Yeah.
highest level of Team USA and you can actually go to the Olympic Training Center and have them work on you there. But that was never offered to me. And I would
Mhm.
consider myself at a high level of Team USA. I mean,
You were. I mean,
what,
you guys were getting all those medals. And
yeah.
what for, right?
So it's like, what do I have to do to get that treatment that I greatly deserve, that I'm putting my body, my mental health basically out there for this sport representing US figure skating, and what do I get in return?
Yeah. Yeah, nobody cares unless you are unless you can be commercialized. There you go. There is another thing. Unless you're standing out so much that all the attention can be given to you, and I don't know, I think it's very, very selective, especially in the US figure skating. I've never made it to that level. I mean, I never competed internationally for the States, but I can only imagine like that nothing really changes much once you get to that national level, and sometimes even international, unless you are that one, star protege that they pick.
Yeah,
If they like your image, if they like everything about you, it doesn't matter what if you're standing on the first or you're like 10th place. If
yeah,
they don't like you, they don't like you.
yeah. Did you happen to watch Weight of Gold on
I
HBO?
did. I did.
That
Yes.
is the perfect example of what we're talking about. And I mean, if we're talking about skating, you can bring up Gracie Gold in that. I mean, she was US figure skating's like child. I mean, incredible girl. I loved her
Yeah.
so much, but it just shows how when she was not of use to them anymore, they just threw her out.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
an amazing athlete. She put her entire life into this sport, And she didn't deserve that, as well as all those other athletes that were talked about in the
Yeah.
documentary. I mean, I think it was that downhill skier that he was like, I was put up there and then I was just torn apart after the Olympics, and it was
Yeah.
the biggest disappointment.
Yeah, those head oh my God, I was watching it, I was getting so like my blood was boiling because it is so ridiculous to put that much pressure on someone, on anyone really. Doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not. Just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you can handle all that freaking pressure. It's even harder for us because we have to think about our performance, but we also have to think about what other people are going to say about us. You know, it's I think it's absolutely ridiculous. The press is terrible. You know, the headlines that they're putting out there are terrible. I think they're like, I think it's not ethical at all. I think it's, yeah, it's not ethical at all. And I remember when I was reading news by Ice Network, man, some of the headlines that were in those articles, I was like, who let you write this? Like, did no one look at the title of this article? They were really like, I think when it was Balasajar and Trenkov, they were still competing, and I think after winning like consecutively like 8 or 9 competitions, they made one mistake, and the headline was something along the lines of failed, you know, like completely broken down, blah blah blah. And I was just sitting there reading like, why are you hating? Like, what's wrong with you? Are you just trying to make yourself look better, or like what's going on? And I think it's anywhere in the world, that kind of headlines, they just get attention, right? They're like, ooh, okay, this is a wow factor. We gotta put it out there. But they don't think about what it's doing to the athletes who might come across those articles, who might read that about themselves and think, oh my God, I am a failure. I am like, you know, all of these things that people say I am. I think it's ridiculous to me, and I'm actually grateful I never got to that level, because I think if I read something like that about myself, I would have been like, okay, I'm not coming out of my room for the next like 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be really hard to deal with that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think all of that can cycle back to the fact that everyone forgets that whatever level of athlete you are, you're a human being first. I mean, your human function, the health of your body, the health of your mind, that all comes first before performance. And even when you're representing the United States and you have to look a certain way, you still have to think about the health of your body, how to get there. You're putting yourself on the line. Your mind is just turning with all the stressors. Your coach just yelled at you for some random crap. Mental health comes first. It doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, you have to take care of your own body, because when you retire, you're left to deal with all of that aftermath. And it doesn't just go away. I mean, just because you struggled with mental health while you were an athlete or struggled with eating disorder like behaviors, when you retire, that stays with you unless you deal with it. And how do you know how to deal with it if you've gone your entire life doing the same thing over and over and no one's ever reached out to you? You don't know who to reach out to. Like, you're completely at a loss. So I think all of these resources that either we don't know about or just aren't there for athletes, and specifically younger female athletes who are so impressionable. I mean, that's really what we have to put a lot of our focus and attention on.
And I think a lot of it has to come from from education for coaches, because they just don't know better. I mean, a coach is supposed to be like almost a family member, right? Once you get to that level, you're spending so much time with your coaches, and they know pretty much everything about you. But the problem is, I think these days, is that a lot of coaches, they used to be athletes and they just started coaching. They don't know any better. They're used to that system, and they're like, well, I achieved some sort of, you know, progress with this. I've achieved a certain level, so it works to an extent, but they don't bother to look further into it. They don't bother to educate themselves on, body movement,
Oh,
nutrition,
girl,
sports psychology, right? Like
I'm
it's
fired up about that.
yeah. So it's not like we can blame them, but at the same time, man, you better step up your game because you're pretty much breaking all those little athletes that come to you.
Because, so let me get into it. You think about it. Every professional has to go through an extensive educational background, right?
Yeah.
Anyone. And good, they should. But
Yeah.
then you have basically any coaches, but we'll stick to US figure skating. So we have your skating coaches, as you said, who are former athletes. They are most likely going to preach what they have experienced, what they've gone through, what they feel works for them. Okay, might be true. But how are you qualified to be a coach?
Yeah.
Just because someone, let's say physical therapy, just because you've gone to physical therapy a lot of times does not mean that you can now become a physical
Right.
therapist without going through the step-by-step educational process. So
Right.
if you were a figure skater, what now means that you're qualified to spend all this time with young, impressionable athletes, tell them how to eat to fuel their bodies, which may or may not be incorrect because where did you get this information from?
Right.
Tell them how to move their body, yank their leg up in a way that maybe it's not meant to. So how do you know the anatomy of the body? Physiology, how do you know what energy system the athlete is using? How do you know what they need to fuel that energy system?
Yeah.
Strength and conditioning, how do you know that lifting weights is going to make a girl bulky? So
Right.
what is your science to back up that information?
Yeah.
There's just so many things that maybe you don't even realize, but the way you say it, what you say, even to that little extent, can have such a big impact on little girls, little boys, any young athlete, even when you're older. I mean,
Yeah.
those things stick with you. So if you don't know what you're saying, if you don't know how you're saying it, like
Yeah.
these athletes are not, they're not going to be the happiest, healthiest, strongest athletes that they can be.
Yeah, exactly. They don't realize that they take a really big responsibility for those athletes who they, those little kids look up to them, look up to those coaches, and because they know, I remember myself when I was little, and then my coaches, all of my coaches, I wanted to be like them. I wanted to make sure that I pleased them. I wanted to make sure that I do everything they tell me to do. And I think I remember my she was a ballet teacher or a choreographer, and we used to do stretching with her. Well, she used to stretch us, let me put it this way. She would use her brute force onto us, and I kid you not, I have relatively tight hips. Well, I'm saying that a very general statement. Very tight hips. I have a hard time getting into a spread eagle or in a bower, or any of those moves. Kind of don't, I can't, I don't go there. So whenever she would stretch me, she would always get annoyed at the fact that my legs wouldn't go. And I'm like, well, I can't. Like, she's like, relax. And I'm like, I'm trying. This freaking hurts. So that she would like yank every single time. Or when we would be in like the Froggy, the reverse one where you go on your stomach and you do so whenever she do it, she would push on my glutes so hard that something would literally rip every single time. Like, I had a sprain, like a sprained muscle. I don't, like, I had an injury with my hip, like, so consistently, like, and once, when you pull your hip, like, you can't walk, like,
Yeah.
it hurts so bad. And I just clearly remember when I was with that team, with that coach, I couldn't walk properly for a big chunk of the time that I used to I worked for them. And it was so ridiculous because I just don't stretch that way. That's not how my body works. And it was kind of just like generalized for everyone. Everyone should just do this stretch, and I'm going to come and I'm going to push it, and somehow magically you're going to be flexible from now on. No, it took me at least 6 years to even get in a like legit split, because I'm just not that flexible. And once I got there, I kind of passed over passed over that point, and then from there I was able to keep my splits. But before that, like, no, it just didn't work for me. So I when you try to apply the same model, the same training model, the same, I don't know, stretching model, the same nutrition model to every single athlete in your group, how are you going to be how are you going to be successful? That's not how athletes work. It might work for some, it might not work for others. So I think it's and plus figure skating is such an individual sport. Like, everyone, it's so individualized with each skater, and there's no, I don't think there's one manual that works for everyone in that sense, if you're trying to look at it in a more complex way. So I think that's a big issue in coaching.
That's a really good point to bring up, because aside from what we talked about before of like what you're saying and how you say it, every person's body is completely different. And I'm studying for my certified strength and conditioning specialist certification. And even within that one textbook, I mean, learning the different types of stretching, dynamic, ballistic, static stretching, the different methods of PNF stretching, how long you have to hold it, why you have to hold it for 30 seconds, how your muscle spindles get into it, how your GTOs react to it, all of that comes into play. And aside from stretching, let's say run through week, this always was literally the worst part for figure skating for me. So, right, you have like your 4 weeks out of a competition. So first week we had singles, then second week we would do quad run through a free, double of short for 2 weeks. Then the last week was singles again, right?
Wow.
Not every person's body is going to react the same way to a quad run through. Some people may have more type 1 fibers. Maybe it's easier for them. Some people might have more type 2. Some people need to focus on different things. Aside from that too, I mean, my body just never reacted well to doing a lot of run-throughs. I mean, I would get so tired and I couldn't recover in enough time for the competition. For me, 2 run-throughs was better. But if you say, I want to do 2 run-throughs, the coach is going to be like, you're weak.
No,
you're going to do 4. If anything, I'm going to make you do 8 now because you wanted to do 2. I mean, there's just nothing
that's just really ridiculous
goes into it. That's from an educational perspective of I'm gonna like overtrain you to add that additional stimulus, but then we're gonna back down like for this, and because this is how your body reacts to it, and this is the testing, and this is how we know. No, it's just everyone's gonna do the same amount, and all in your face, you're tired, whatever, you get injured from it, whatever. I mean, that's just the system, and it's wrong.
Definitely 100% agree with you. I mean, I was always a more like explosive, terrible stamina kind of athlete. So to me, it was, no matter what I did, I could never I think the last time I ran through a program without any issues was when I was 13. And from there on, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it's not necessarily because I was weak, it's because I wasn't trained in a correct way to be able to go through the entire long program. So I think it's definitely important to understand the physiology, the anatomy of your athlete, and apply your training model to that particular athlete, not to everyone out there.
100%. And then if we then bring in strength and conditioning, so not everything can be achieved just on the ice, right? I mean, you're not an incredible athlete, let's say football player, baseball player, they don't just sit on the field rehearsing everything over and over. There's a lot of other things that go into it, and it just blows my mind when especially girls don't want to do strength and conditioning, don't want to work out in the gym, because all it's doing is making them look muscular, look bulky. There's no,
You're an athlete. You're going to look bulky regardless.
yeah, that too, but there's no understanding of all the benefits that it gives you and how
Yeah.
it can help you excel in your sport.
Yeah.
And if a strength and conditioning coach, if a figure skating coach was able to come up to the athlete and say, hey, like, this is why I think you should do it. This is the benefits that you're going to see. This is what we're going to work on.
Right.
Your body physique will change slightly because, you know, you're growing muscle, you're losing fat, it happens, but it's not for the purpose of making you look bulky. I mean,
Yeah.
lifting heavier than 10 pounds is not going to make you bulky. And the gym was my favorite place. And it bothered me so much when I would see like my fellow teammates and the girls are just squatting with 10 pounds. And I'm like, I mean, it's not doing anything for you. You're not presenting your body with enough of a stimulus. Like, you might as well just leave. If you're here just to burn the calories, then talk to a nutritionist rather to figure out how to better fuel your body, because the gym is so much more than just looking like a bodybuilder.
Yeah. Yeah, I think back when I was training, the gym was used specifically for the purpose of running, getting on the bike or an elliptical to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go get on the elliptical for an hour. That was it. Okay, what is that going to do? And then I look at the calorie count and I'm like, oh, wow, I'm burning so much calories. I'm going to look skinny and I'm going to be amazing. I'm going to get through all my jumps and I'm going to land all my triples. You know, if only I'm skinnier, you know, if only I'm just a little, you know, if I get on the elliptical for an hour, I'm going to be an amazing athlete. You know, there's no purpose. There's no like, there's no explanation for the reason we're doing it, you know, except for that you're going to be skinnier. You're going to be in Ukraine. It was a little more targeted towards, you know, developing that explosive power for the jumps, which is, it's normal, you know. And I had huge quads regardless, you know. I remember I was at sectionals and it was my first year at sectionals. And I was walking and this lady looks at me and she's like, oh my God, you've got some quads, girl.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, do I say thank you? Do I like, you know, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna keep walking here. You know, and then everyone was like, dude, like, if you're not gonna succeed as a skater, you should be a bodybuilder. Or like, you know, I'm like, thanks. Just that's a good idea, you know. Maybe I wouldn't be looked at you know, as I am in figure skating just because I have big muscles and I can't jump that high because I have big muscles. No, it's all like it's all ridiculous. I don't know who came up with that.
Yeah, I mean, I have really broad shoulders and I'm like a wider built girl and I'm pretty tall, so I was always told that I was too muscular. I looked too big. I looked like a bodybuilder. And honestly, my saving grace was the fact that my last partner, Alex Benoit, was tall and big, because my first partner was a little bit shorter and I was constantly in the battle of trying to make myself look smaller, tailoring the dresses a certain way so that my shoulders didn't look so wide, worrying about my weight all the time. And like, that's not how it should be. I should be focusing on my skating, my performance, instead of worrying about how much taller my boy is so that I don't have to like worry about my weight. And I mean, it was really a big help that he was tall, because I could then use my like bigger build for my advantage. But even then, like,
you guys look great on the ice. You guys looked very organic. You know, your height difference was perfect. You guys were both tall and like slim. I don't know, like to you're taller than me. You're obviously taller than me and bigger built than I am. But on the ice, when you step on the ice, there's not a time when I would look at you and be like, oh, you know, she's too big. If anyone saw you guys being saw you being too big on the ice for whatever reason, they have a problem, honestly. Because there are so many tall skaters out there who are in ice dance who look beautiful on the ice. It's all about those extensions. Your lifts looked amazing, and that's such a big problem. Like, I'm like, just enjoy the skating. Oh my God, they're
Yeah.
so good. Why do you have to say something negative?
Yeah. But especially like those comments about like my wide shoulders. I'm like, that's just my anatomy. That's the way I'm
Yeah,
built. I
yeah,
can't do anything about that. And I naturally have like a more muscular upper body. Like I've always had
yeah,
a good tone in my arms and back. And it's not just because I'm lifting weights and like stopping lifting weights is what is it going to get me? I'm going to be weaker. I'm not going to be able to hold myself up in a lift.
yeah,
I'll look better, but then what? We're going to place like lower down. I mean,
yeah,
what are you actually trying to accomplish? Are we talking optimal performance? Because then let's go for it full on. If we're just
yeah,
talking physique, like go be a model. The sport should not be the place where the emphasis is on physique. The sport is optimal performance, how well you can perform, how well you can push your body.
I
Fuel
agree.
yourself just for that. And I think it's just such like a mixed message, because you're seeing high athletes and they look a certain way, and maybe it's just what comes naturally to that person, and then you're pushing that entire mold onto everyone else when that may not suit them, and that may be the one thing that ends their career, when if it didn't, maybe they would have become the amazing athlete that they had
Yeah,
the potential for.
yeah, yeah. You don't know what they can accomplish if only they have a positive message being directed at them at all times, and it's so sad to see that. Like, I saw the interview with Amber, and amazing interview, and she's really a smart girl, and she knows what she's got to do, and she's on the right track, and it was so nice to see that, because all you hear these days is, oh, all I heard when I moved to the States, oh, if you're not Asian, you can't do those jumps. If you have to be small, you have to be tiny in order to rotate those triples.
Yeah.
That's all I heard, and I've never heard it before. And they're like, oh, that's why Asian girls are so good, because they're so small. I'm like, well, hey, like, I'm pretty good. I'm not Asian, and I can jump because I have power. Maybe they have advantage at being able to rotate a little faster, but I don't see how that is a factor in being a good athlete. It's not just, especially in figure skating. Everyone is out there, like, you look at videos from skaters, 20 years ago, like Slutskaya, right? And Butyrska, and like they are normal sized people. They're not like tiny, they're normal size, they're women. It's women skating, it's a pleasure to see that, and they still rotate those jumps, no
Yeah.
problem. Yeah,
I
it's so
think
sad.
somewhere, I think somewhere along the way, we just kind of lost our priorities. We lost what it is that we're actually supposed to be focusing on. And we see like one person become successful and they look a certain way, they feel themselves a certain way, they practice a certain way, whatever. And we say, this is the only reason they're successful, is because they have done these things. Therefore, these things must work for everyone else. But you
Yeah,
don't take into account how a person's body reacts to those certain things. Someone being short may do well just as much as someone being tall and muscular. I mean, if you gymnastics, like, right, Nastya Lukin, she was tall,
she's tall,
so tall
yeah.
for an acrobatic gymnast, and like she broke that mold, in my opinion, of like
Yeah.
gymnasts can only be small. I mean, when I got into gymnastics, I was doing acrobatic gymnastics, and
Mhm.
they were like, no, you're too tall, you have to go into rhythmic gymnastics. When like, how do you know? Maybe I could have made it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Same as people telling me, "Oh, you're small, you should be a pair skater."
Yeah.
Well, I'm not small anymore. What happened? You were wrong.
Yeah.
Because my mom is, very short, and then my dad is kind of tall, but they never saw my dad. So they were like, oh, you're going to be short like your mom. My mom's like 5 feet tall. And, they're like, oh, you're going to be perfect for pairs. Well, I'm sorry. my mind is not there. I can't do a throw because I'm freaking scared of heights. Like, did you take that into account when you pushed me to do pair skating? Yeah, it was very like whatever. It was very like the federation was really involved. Whatever they say goes, and
Mhm.
uh, a lot of people that way just basically became disposed of because they didn't accomplish
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
I think, however, what US figure skating can take from that is being more involved, reaching out to all their athletes, even the younger girls. I mean, if you tackle a problem earlier on, when
Yeah.
you get to the point where you're an elite athlete representing the United States, you're going to save money because you're not going to spend however much dealing with injuries that have been, dormant for several years,
Yeah.
eating disorder like behaviors, mental health problems. I mean, we have to put all our resources into the younger generations too, and then reach out to them, see what we can do better. I mean, from the Weight of Gold documentary, I didn't even know US figure skating had like a mental health resources page. Either that's new or they just didn't market it. And I was a Team USA athlete. I mean, how many times did I go to the OTC?
Yeah.
The only times that you saw the nutritionist, spoke to a mental health professional was either at Lake Placid's camp or Champs camp.
Hmm.
What about the rest of the time? I mean, yeah, that one talk may be great, but how do I keep in touch? Who do I keep
Yeah.
in touch with? How can I help myself the entire year around those times?
Yeah. It has to be consistent. It has to be a consistent, schedule. It can't just be one time, like, just because you work out one time doesn't mean you're going to get stronger for the rest of the
Yeah,
year. It's the
yeah,
same thing. It's very important to keep that consistency, whether it's in body, like getting body work done, like manual therapy,
mhm,
um, physical therapy, you know, speaking to a psychologist, a nutritionist, because things change, you grow. You spoke to a nutritionist when you were 14 and they give you advice. That advice might not work for you when you're 18, 20.
yeah,
It has to always be updated. You can't just kind of ride the wave of that one time that you got advice from someone. So I think that's also very important, but nobody really sees the benefit in putting the effort and putting the funding into a sports psychologist for the team. Maybe there is one, but one person for the entire Team USA, that's ridiculous.
yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to do better as a sport. I mean, as a community.
Yeah.
So you worked alongside a physical therapist and you said a lot of athletes would come in. Did you ever see any like patterns in the female athletes that would come in?
um So we actually were in a clinic. Our first location where I worked at was inside a volleyball training center.
Mm-hmm.
So we had all kinds of athletes from age 7 to age 18, I believe, like through high school.
Mm-hmm.
I would say a lot of them actually. Volleyball it's a completely different sport. It's a team sport.
Yeah.
So definitely different from figure skating, and I would say in a lot of ways healthier, because all the girls who walked in, never once I saw someone who was underweight or just talking about how they're not eating today. No, I never heard anyone say, oh, I'm on a diet, or I can't I can't like I can't eat this because I'm trying to lose weight. No, they were all very um, healthy, to me. The only thing is the patterns I would see is how they approached injuries. Um, every single athlete, whether it's because the coach told them so or because they wanted to continue training, nobody except for maybe one or two people out of 200, 300 athletes that I've seen wanted to go through rehab properly.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. And I understand, because from being an athlete, you really want to go out there and you want to train. Once you start feeling good, you're like, okay, let's take this to the next level. I'm ready to go. But nobody was taught that proper rehab is going to ensure that they are going to stay healthy throughout their entire career. You know,
Mhm.
nobody was taught that. Nobody, when we told them about things like, you know, prematurely going into competitions or start training while you're still in recovery phase might trigger other injuries. They're like, oh, what? Like, but I'm healthy. Nothing ever hurts. Nothing ever hurts. This is the first time I got injured. What do you know? Literally 2 months later, the same injury or another injury. You know,
Mhm.
nobody took the time to explain to them the importance of rehab. Their coaches would always, we had to write notes to the coaches saying, she is not ready. She is still having pain when she's doing certain movements. She is still in recovery phase. Do not let her train. Do not let her do drills. Do not let her do like lateral drills because her knee's gonna her knee's gonna go out. And you know, and then what do you know? They come back to us like, oh, okay, so actually my knee hurts a little bit, and we're like,
Mhm.
okay, a little bit, how little bit? And they're like, oh, I actually can't do that.
Not a lot. It's a
We're
lot
like,
of it. I can't walk.
you know, and we're like, okay, we understand that you really want to train. We understand your coach is pushing you to train, but you need to take care of your body. So lack of education on that part is like so vast. Like nobody wants to take care of their body, and their parents, oh my God, their parents are a whole other story because the parents, I feel like sometimes are the ones who push them. It's not even necessarily athlete. No, you're going to have to go and you're going to have to train. I don't care what that physical therapist says. They just don't want you to train. So you go. I told you you can. So you're fine. That a lot of that, so much of that. It was ridiculous. And when we tell them, when we talk to the parents, and we're like, look, we assessed your daughter or son. They are, you know, lacking that and that and that in their physical, like in their movement patterns. You know, they have wrong movement patterns, which eventually can lead to an injury.
Yeah.
Would you like, you need to take care of that while they're still growing before they reach that level. Oh, okay, I'll think about it. You
Like,
know,
it wasn't
oh,
really a suggestion.
yeah, right. Like, just letting you know, hey, like, you need to get your child's butt in here every single day to make a difference because they're going to grow up facing so many injuries. You're going to be tired going to the physical therapist. You are basically prematurely killing their athletic career. You
Yeah.
know, nobody wants to pay attention to that ever. That was one of the most frustrating things. And then another thing, whenever a child gets injured, we had an athletic trainer on site, and then we had Nadine, who's the physical therapist. And a lot of times the athlete will go to their doctor,
Mhm.
their general, excuse me, their general doctor. So then they went to the doctor, they come back with a note. Oh, my doctor said that this is whatever sprain, and I can be 2 weeks in a boot, and then I can go back to training, and I'll be fine.
Mhm.
And we're like, oh, really? You have a grade 3 ankle sprain. You're going to walk 2 weeks in a boot, and then you're going to go back to training. Is that what you're telling me? Yeah, that's what the doctor said. Okay, 2 weeks pass. They're out of the boot. Their ankle is still this size. You know, they're still, they can't walk, obviously.
Yeah.
They go back to the doctor. The doctor's like, yeah, it's still swollen. How about you walk for another month in a boot? Okay, sure. Should I do any exercises, Mima? No, you're fine. It's just gonna, you know. So they come back to us and they're like, yeah, my doctor said it's fine.
Oh god.
I cannot tell you how, like, I would say at least like 50 to 100 instances of doctors telling them that they're fine. It was so frustrating, and then their parents get pissed at us that we're not letting them train because the doctor said, you know, that's that is my biggest that's my biggest takeaway from that experience. You know, just because the doctor said it's fine doesn't mean it's fine.
Yeah.
Doctors are general doctors for a reason, you know.
Yeah. I think
um
that's something so different. I mean, my perspective has completely flipped. I mean, when I was an athlete and something was hurting, first off, if you tell your coach and they say, get off the ice, you immediately,
Yeah.
your first thought is like, oh my God, like, no, they're angry. They're
I
upset.
did something wrong. Yeah.
Now I'm guilty. Like, no, I'm just going to push through it. I'm going to be on the ice. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to look like a baby. Like, I'll suck it up. So that
Yeah.
in itself is like the wrong way of handling it. And
Yeah.
second off, I would go to a doctor and I would just hope. I would hope the doctor would be like, you're fine. Or even if the doctor said 2 weeks off, I'm like, I can't. I'm going to go to another doctor that says otherwise, or I'm not even, like, I have never once taken 2 weeks off after a doctor has like prescribed me to take 2 weeks off. And I mean, now like studying kinesiology in the body and just how everything plays into itself, I'm like, I was so wrong. And it really is just a lack of education, because you don't understand how all those things can tumble and then throw you out with something way worse. And I saw something on Instagram today that was like, your body is not an expense, it's an investment. Invest in your health, in your well-being early on, and then you won't have to deal with all those extra expenses and like issues.
Exactly.
And it's so eye-opening actually studying these things. And I just realized how wrong we all were, and how wrong the system was, and just we could have handled things so much better if only I knew better, if my coach knew better, if someone would have educated me, told me on what I was actually doing to my body.
Yeah, 100%. It's all preventable. That's the thing. It's all preventable. It's all easily fixable, but nobody takes the time to educate us about it. Nobody takes the time to explain it. When I started working with the PT, she had all these resources in her computer, and there was just a folder of, resources. And I was going through the folder and I was like, I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to do that. There's a concept of periodization. So basically you like train, a certain amount of time, then you're supposed to take time off, and then you're back. Nobody taught me that. Like if I get a week in a year that I would take off, that's a big accomplishment. I would only be off when I'm really sick. That's it. I wouldn't get any extra time off. That's about it. You just train, and you're like, working hard as a horse, and then eventually that horse falls and it can't walk no more. So yeah, it's ridiculous how little awareness there is, how little education there is.
Yeah, I mean, I would wake up every morning and I would just tell myself that like there was not a day that I skated without pain, and I was just like, this is just my life. Like, I'm always going to be in pain. I'm always going to be skating in pain. Like, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. Oh, it makes me so sad, because it's us too that thought that way, and imagine all the athletes out there who think that way. It's just so sad.
Yeah. So what would be your main advice as a professional in the field now to young girls who may be experiencing pain or don't really know what they should be doing next?
Oh man, I think um there's so many things.
Yeah.
definitely definitely tell your parents about it. Don't, if you're still young, if you're still, a teenager, if you're dependent on your parents, definitely let them know and say, hey, this really hurts. Don't let it get to a point where they visibly see that it hurts. So once you start feeling that ankle when you tweaked it, if you're like, oh, I can kind of walk on that, yeah, I can walk on that, I can walk it off, but then the next day it hurts even more, and then you keep walking it off, it's eventually going to get to a point where you can't do anything. And once you can't do anything, you're going to have to take a huge step back, and that's going to be worse for your athletic career. You have to catch things early on to prevent them from getting worse and prevent them from triggering further injuries. Because if you injure one part of the body, our body is so in tune, just overall it's in tune. Each part of the body is in tune with the other. If you're injured if you've injured one body part, the other one will follow, because you start compensating. if you're limping on a sprained nail, why do you think we don't let you limp? Why do you think people use crutches? So that you don't limp, so you don't throw your back out, you don't throw your knee out. It's all connected. So definitely make sure to talk to someone, make sure to let your parents know, make sure to go to a professional. And I would say, rather than going to a general doctor, go to someone who is who specializes, who's qualified in injuries in particular. I know that it's expensive. Physical therapy is expensive. Chiropractor is expensive, but invest in your health, like you said. Make sure to catch that early on. Make sure to look for a professional who is well-rounded, who has experience working not with just, general population, but specializes in certain sport or has worked with athletes quite a lot, because they will know better than someone who works with patients recovering after a stroke, as opposed to someone who's worked with athletic injuries for a while. Make sure to rehab all the way. If you rehab an injury, rehab all the way. Don't slack off on your exercises, because that's what's gonna get you back in the game and strong. Because if you're leaving anything out, you're eventually gonna get caught up with the same injury in the future. Don't neglect your body in general, in terms of, hydration, in terms of, your state. Yeah.
That just came out, I don't remember where it was, about like Russian figure skaters, and the girls would talk about how they wouldn't be allowed to drink water. They would just gargle it in their mouth and then spit it out so they wouldn't gain water weight.
I think I read about that. Well, I'll tell you what, this portrays like my own personal experience with just having issues with eating and stuff like that. But I used to do something that I think is terrible, and people who knew that I did that and didn't tell me anything, they're wrong. But I basically, not to gain weight, I used to take the food that I really wanted to eat, I would chew it and I would spit it out. And I thought that was normal, So don't do that, you guys. That's not good. That means something's wrong. Catch it, like, don't share your issues, share your struggles. If anything is bothering you, you have to share it with someone, because that's how we get it out of our system. Otherwise, you're cooped it all inside, and you don't have anyone to talk to, and you get more and more in your head, and it just snowballs from there. You really have to pay attention to your inner voice. Definitely pay attention to your inner voice. If your body tells you something's wrong, pay attention to that.
Because I mean, pain is there for a reason. It's an indicator that something is wrong, something needs attention. You need to handle it. And just popping Advil just because you're in pain,
it's not gonna help. Don't pop Advils, you guys.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem. I mean, you have to deal with it, put the time in, go through the whole rehabilitation process, and then you're going to come out of it a better athlete, a healthier human being.
Yeah, and another thing, if there is no such thing as a quick solution to a problem that's been there for a long time. So when someone tells you, oh, just get a shot and it's going to go away, it's not going to go away. All you're doing is just getting rid of your symptoms. The issue is still there. So if you don't address the issue, and like I'm talking injury wise, for example, so if you don't address the issue that got you to that point of pain, it's still going to come back. You're going to have to keep doing those quick solutions if you don't get to the root of the issue.
Yeah, that's a really important and good thing to mention.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my overall goal with this like Women in Athletics series would be to try and help educate those coaches, parents, athletes themselves, and actually build a certification program that would kind of combined aspects of everything. I mean, you have your nutrition, your anatomy, physiology, your strength and conditioning, your sports psychology, and make that a requirement for all coaches. But I mean, that's such a hard thing to actually put into play. And I mean,
Yeah.
it would be amazing if I can actually get it to work, but it's probably going to be a long, long ways away. But I think really implementing something like that will be that like biggest factor that's going to make a change, because everything that we've talked about can stem down to lack of education
Yeah.
and not really not knowing what's happening within the body and what you're doing to the body. So
Yeah, definitely. At least, even if, there's no opportunity to get to that level building a certification program, at least this kind of resources are out there for
yeah.
people to, see themselves and make their own, decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they could relate to something like this. I'm sure a lot of athletes are going to relate to
Yeah.
what we're talking about and what you're talking about with other people too. And I think that's a huge start, because there are no resources for young athletes out there. They don't know, like you said, like you did your research, but you don't necessarily know where to go, where to
Yeah.
look. Yeah.
And I think, and another really important thing to mention is that it's good to talk about these things because you need to share them, and someone else isn't going to judge you. I mean, a
Yeah.
professional's main goal, like this is their entire life, their profession. They're just here to help you. They're not going to
Yeah.
judge you. They're not going to care about anything that you might be internalizing. I mean, they're just going to try and tackle the problem with you and help you become a healthy and better person. So
Yeah.
hopefully talking about these issues in this series will just show girls that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to put them out in the open, and
Yeah.
it's okay to ask for help from someone else. It's not, doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you're not strong. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you can't fend for yourself. It
Yeah.
just means that you're taking into account what your body really needs, and you're putting in that effort, that
Yeah.
investment in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not sharing this, and other people are not sharing this to get pity on us. We've done what we could. It's not like, oh, you poor thing, you quit because you had an injury. No, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell people that it doesn't have to be that way. Because learn from our mistakes. My grandma would always say, stupid people learn from their own mistakes, and smart people learn from other people's mistakes. So she has a very Russian approach to
Yeah.
things, but she always told me, learn from other people's mistakes. Don't make your own mistakes, just because you don't want to listen to someone else's
Yeah.
experience. Yeah, definitely be open-minded, and be willing to accept other people's kind of position.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here and chatting with me. I think we had a really great conversation, and hopefully
Yeah.
from your perspective as a also kinesiology bachelor and certified massage therapist and working with a PT, you have that experience of rehabilitation and problems, and a lot of girls can really grasp that idea that if you are in pain, really invest in your body, tackle
Yeah.
the issue, go 100% into it, and
Yeah.
then it's going to end up doing you better in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me, and I hope that this shines light on some issues out there and helps someone, like, someone who's looking for those resources and looking for that kind of information, and hopefully find something new for them, um, because of this talk.
Okay. Well, thank you so
You're welcome.
much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.